Hi everyone! In this video we're going to be covering how to make pizza dough and then all the really fun things that you can do with that pizza dough. You can always make the classic pizza with whatever toppings that you want to, but there's so many other options. You can make calzones, strombolis, you can make breadsticks, you can even make dessert pizza. So in this video we're going to show you how to make all those things, but the most important thing is to start out with a really strong pizza dough. And it might seem like it's tough, but in this economy, we all need to learn how to make some things at home, so here we go. Pizza is a yeast dough, and so that means that the yeast is going to help it rise, but also one of the most important things that yeast does is it adds flavor. And that flavor is what gives us that nice crust that is not going to taste just bland and dull. So pizza dough can be used for pizza, calzones, strombolis, breadsticks. The sky's the limit with what you can do with pizza dough. You just have to figure out how creative that you would like to be. And it's something that you can customize for your entire family, and it costs so much less to make it at home. So to start out with your dough, you're going to put yeast and sugar into the bowl of your mixer with the dough hook. And we want that sugar because that's going to feed the yeast, and that's going to help it grow and start multiplying and doing its little eating and burping thing that it does in the dough. It is a microorganism that eats sugar and releases carbon dioxide and alcohol. And as I tell my students all the time, it's either going to burp or pass gas, whichever one makes you giggle a little bit more. And that process is called fermentation. So after that, we're going to add water that is between 110 and 120 degrees. And it is important that it is at this temperature because yeast has a very narrow range in which it's comfortable, and it doesn't really do what you want it to do unless it's in that range. Cooler and that yeast is not going to activate. Think about us when it's cold outside, not wanting to move. And warmer, and that yeast is just not going to make it. Yeast has a very quick reaction because it's so tiny to too much heat. So we want to keep it right in that range where it's super happy. After that, we're going to add oil, and this is going to kind of depend on what you're using the dough for in the end. If you're making a savory pizza that's a little more Italian flavored, you're definitely going to want to use an extra virgin olive oil. And then for a sweet one, you're going to use vegetable or canola oil, something like that. So after this, we're going to add in bread flour. And bread flour is super important to pizza dough because we are really relying on that gluten structure, which is the protein that's found in flours in general. And gluten has kind of gotten a bad rap, but it also allows for that elastic structure. And that elastic structure is what lets the dough trap the CO2 that the yeast is going to create in this process. And so you can't really make a strong yeast dough without having gluten in a lot of cases. So after that, we're going to add our salt on top of the flour. And the reason that we're not adding that directly on top of the yeast is that salt checks the growth of yeast, but if it comes in direct contact with the yeast, it's going to kill it. And so it's really important that you not put the salt directly on top of the yeast. After this, we're going to turn the mixer on, and like any of our other yeast doughs that we've talked about on this channel, you are going to need to adjust the flour amounts, and you know you've added enough when it cleans the bowl. And this can depend on humidity, it can depend on how you measure the flour, and so if you have a more humid day, you might need more flour because there's more water in the recipe. If it's a drier time period, you might not need to add as much. So I usually start out with about 3/4 of the flour, and then adjust from there, and I kind of keep an eye on what the weather has been as well. Once that dough comes together and cleans the bowl, you're going to let your mixer run with the dough hook to knead the dough. And this is going to take a little while. The dough is basically being kneaded by the dough hook, which is going to give it that nice elastic structure without us having to work that hard. It should also need about 5 minutes to allow those gluten strands to form. So it's going to take a little while, and your mixer, you can see mine is moving around a little bit, so don't walk away. Keep an eye on things. This is the same effect as chewing bubble gum before you blow bubbles. You know how you can't blow bubbles with chewing gum until you've chewed it for a little while? Same thing with gluten. It's not going to be able to form those little air pockets in the dough without this kneading structure. So then we are going to take the dough off the mixer and coat the dough with a little bit of oil and let it sit until it's doubled in size. And once again, you're using the same oil that you used earlier in the recipe. If you don't want to use the dough that day and want to save it for later on, you can put the oil in a zip top bag and store it in the fridge for up to a week. After that point, you would need to make fresh dough because of food safety reasons. Put that in there and let it rise. So now, while we are waiting for that to rise, we're gonna make our own pizza sauce, because this is something that can be a little bit expensive as well. You're gonna take some olive oil, put it in the pan, and then add some minced garlic to it. I'm just using garlic in this case, so it comes straight out of the jar. And add some salt, pepper, Italian seasoning, and then we are going to add in a can of tomatoes. And these can be any tomatoes that you prefer. I usually use diced tomatoes just because they break up a little bit easier, but you can use canned whole tomatoes, whatever you have in your cabinet. You're going to cook this until it heats through, and that is also going to hydrate those spices a little bit. And if you can make this the day before even, it'll develop its flavor a little bit more overnight as well. And so you're just going to cook that until it gets warm all the way through and it's kind of bubbling. And then I'm going to use a stick blender to get those chunks broken up that are a little bit, would stand up a little bit if they were on a pizza. So we are going to cook this a little bit after it's been blended up until it reduces a little bit and you get to your desired flavor profile. And this is going to kind of depend on you. You can cook it down a little bit more, or if you want a fresher type taste, don't cook it as much. So now we're going to make a traditional pizza. So you can add whatever toppings that you want to. We're just going to do pepperoni because that's what we enjoy. So one thing that's really important when you're making pizza is that the melt of the cheese is very dependent on the quality of the cheese. And so it is very important that you grate your own cheese because it's going to help with the melting and the texture. The cheese that comes from the grocery store generally has a little bit of a coating on it, and it just does not melt as well as it does when you are grating your own. And usually the chunks of cheese are either cheaper or at least the same price as the shredded cheese. So when we have got our cheese grated and our sauce ready and our dough is risen, we are going to be ready to make pizza. So you're going to oil your pan just a little bit. Don't put too much on there because it will come off the pan and go on the bottom of your oven. And then you are going to take your dough and spread it out. And one thing that's really important about pizza dough is because of that gluten structure, it's going to fight you a little bit. So the more that you fight it, the more that it is going to contract back into that middle and be a much smaller pizza. So you just want to pull that out to the sides and then just walk away. Don't mess with it too much. If it is still fighting you, you can walk away for a few minutes and come back and that gluten structure will relax a little bit. After you have spread your dough, you're going to add about 6 to 8 ounces of sauce and then add your cheese and toppings. You do not want to over sauce or over cheese this because that will make your dough be a little bit soggy. We're going to bake this at 500 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. And it's not going to take very long. Keep an eye on it and you'll come out with an incredible pizza that is so much better than anything that you could purchase yourself, and you have the satisfaction of making your own pizza. Another thing you can do if you would like to, you can do your own garlic and cheese crust. Any sort of flavored crust, you just brush butter on there and then sprinkle Parmesan cheese or garlic around the edges. Buffalo chicken pizza is one of our household favorites, and it's one that is pretty common in restaurants, but you can make your own so much cheaper and so much better. So we are going to start out with chopping up some chicken nuggets, and if you want to know how to make your own chicken nuggets, then check out the chicken nugget video for the recipe, and these can be oven baked as well, but having that crispy outside on there makes a big difference in the buffalo chicken pizza. So we're spreading our dough as before, and in this pizza we're going to use mozzarella and cheddar. So we are putting the cheese on first with this one, and we are doing the mozzarella and cheddar cheese on there. And keep in mind when you're putting the first cheese on that a second cheese is coming, so you may not want to use as much. And just get it spread out really nicely. Then we are going to throw our chicken chunks on there and spread them out kind of evenly. Then we are going to drizzle this with buffalo sauce. And buffalo sauce is literally just a mixture of hot sauce and butter. Traditionally, it's Frank's Red Hot. We are using Texas Pete in this particular case. But use whatever hot sauce you enjoy and mix it with some butter, and you got buffalo sauce. We are once again baking this at 500 for 15 to 20 minutes, and it is going to get done very nicely, and that's going to give us that nice crust browning that we're looking for. So this is what your final product looks like. So one of the most fun things you can do with pizza dough is make dessert pizza. And dessert pizza is a great option if you want to make one pizza for eating for dinner, and then you can have dessert later on. So for a s'mores pizza, we are going to oil our pan with a neutral flavored oil and then spread your dough out. And then we are putting the chocolate on the bottom, and this is going to be chocolate chips. And the reason that we're putting them under the graham crackers is to keep that chocolate from burning in the oven. And you just want to evenly spread the chocolate chips around the dough. We are not adding our marshmallows yet, but we are going to add our graham crackers on top of the chocolate chips to kind of protect them and give them a little bit of insulation. And we are going to put this in the oven before the marshmallows for about 10 minutes. And then after that 10 minutes, we are going to add the marshmallows on there and bake it for 5 more minutes. And the temperature is lower on this one just because sugar just naturally burns a little bit more. And so you want to be careful with that. You could also brush the crust with butter and then do like a little sprinkle of sugar or something on there to give it that flavor. But that is how you make a s'mores pizza. For the cinnamon roll pizza, this is a pretty basic one. And honestly, you could probably use this dough to make cinnamon rolls if you wanted to. But you are going to brush that dough with butter all over and then just sprinkle it with cinnamon sugar. And it just makes like a little cinnamon sugar pizza shape, and then you have a dessert pizza. We're baking this at 400 for 15 to 20 minutes. Once again, the lower temperature because the sugar browns pretty well on its own. Another thing that is really fun to do with pizza dough is to make strombolis and calzones. And these are literally very similar processes, but it has to do with the shape of them. So for a calzone, you're just going to take half of a dough, so half of what you would use for a pizza, and then you are going to make that into a circle. And then after you have made that into the circle, I usually put it onto the parchment, and I will add mozzarella and whatever toppings that you would like to half of the circle. And you don't want to overload this because you do want those toppings to get heated through and it doesn't cook for a real long time. Then you are going to fold that over and kind of crimp it. And then you are going to go around the edges and just kind of fold over those edges on top of each other to seal that in. So for a stromboli, you are going to take half of a dough and take that into a rectangle and try to keep those edges as even as you can. And notice I'm pulling and stretching and not rolling it out. So then you are going to add the cheese and toppings of your choice and leave about 1 inch of that dough blank at the top. So about where you see those pepperonis are is about how much I'm leaving not without any toppings on it. Then you are going to roll this up and kind of tuck your fingers in there so that you can keep those toppings in there pretty well. And then you are going to pinch that edge and the ends to encapsulate all of those toppings and so that the cheese doesn't come out the ends. You are going to brush these with garlic butter and bake them at 400 for 15 to 20 minutes. Serve these with tomato sauce that you can dip in them, and they are absolutely amazing. So the final thing that we're going to be doing in this video is making breadsticks. And breadsticks are super simple, but sometimes the simplest things are the best. And so this is another thing you can customize a little bit with the way that you make them up. But spray the pan and stretch the dough. The shape of this is not going to matter as much as it does with the pizza. And honestly, even with the pizza, it doesn't matter that much. It all tastes the same. But then once you get that dough stretched out, we are going to cut that into strips very carefully. And then brush that with garlic and butter. You may want to add a little bit of salt in there as well, and then you are going to sprinkle that with Italian seasoning. Just to give it a little bit of color and a little bit of extra flavor. And we are going to be baking this at 400 for 15 to 20 minutes until it gets brown and looks like breadsticks. So as you can see, pizza dough is very, very versatile. You can end up with a bunch of different products. You can multiply the recipes to make it work for you, but it's super, super easy and can be a great fun activity for your whole family to get involved with cooking. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let us know in the comments if you decide to try this out, and please don't forget to share this out to anybody that you think might want to see it, and don't forget to subscribe.